1500 hours, August 2010. We're flying at 20,000 feet. Our team, which is led by my best friend Steve and I, are on our way to Ruby, Alaska in search of a monster known to many as Bigfoot, the descendants of an unholy union between fallen angels and the daughters of men. Modern day cannibalistic giants that grow to 12 feet tall and weigh over 1,000 pounds. These creatures are fast, aggressive, and very territorial. They are known to rip a man apart limb from limb and devour him, as foretold by the Book of Giants. My name is Roger, and I've been called many things. To some, I'm a crazy man. To others, a hero. But in reality, what I am and what we do is hunt monsters. Our objective is to hunt and kill the clan north of Ruby, Alaska, and cleanse the earth of these vile creatures. This story is the tale of our expedition. The events detailed here are all true. Many of you think you know what Bigfoot is, but you don't. You are ignorant to the reality of what it is that you face, and you assume that you're safe. I can assure you that the world is full of dangerous monsters. And if you actually knew the truth, you will realize that our world holds many terrifying creatures. Just the sight of these creatures causes the hearts of the best men to falter. On a plane, the 5,000-mile flight to Alaska was just as I expected it to be, full of jokes and laughter. After all, the crew we had was a mixed bag of sociopaths, psychopaths, and one techie. I'm not sure about the company you keep in your life, but these guys, they're a handful. Now for the crew. Steve and I go back, way back to the 5th grade. I'll never forget the day I first met him. It was cold as shit. And in the infinite wisdom of St. Rita's private school, they decided to let the kids out on the yard for recess. Now don't let the name fool you. St. Rita's was a private school, but it was kind of rough. To this day, I don't understand why Steve's father insisted he attended the school anyway. I guess you can say his father believed in tough love. As for Steve's family, now they're rich. And I'm not talking about bullshit.com stock market rich. I'm talking about oil money rich. The type of rich no one in his family really had to work for the next 7 generations. But his dad was old school. He drove a beat-up pickup truck and made sure he counted every penny. Steve's older brother worked at McDonald's his entire senior year at high school. Anyway, back to the story. That day, Steve was on the yard, surrounded by some of the less desirable kids in the 6th and 7th grade. And true to his MO, he didn't know when to back down, and he damn sure didn't know when to shut up. I couldn't stand by and watch them just beat him up, so I interceded, trying to help out, only to take that ass whooping with him. Ever since that day, Steve and I have been best friends. And man, what friends have we been? Our friendship has taken us all around the world. And we got into some crazy shit. I'm talking about drunken fistfights on the beach in Ibiza, chased by tigers in India, arrested in Moroccan whorehouses. The list goes on and on and on. The sheer and utter delight and danger that we have experienced as friends is just incomprehensible. It was all fun and games until one evening in the jungles of Venezuela, we ran into something that should not have existed. This creature had the body and a face of a woman with wings like a bat. It ruined our expedition and killed 50% of our crew. From that day on, we decided to hunt and kill these abominations wherever we may find them. Which brings me to the next member of our crew. It was on an expedition to Africa in search of the Lion of Judah that we found him clinging to his last breath. Vital was 18 years old when we discovered him, hidden inside of a hollowed out tree stump, clutching his empty AK-47. He was a fierce child soldier. Vital's parents were killed when he was 10 years old. His mother brutally raped and his father killed before his eyes. So for the next 8 years, he was forced to fight and kill indiscriminately. During that time frame, he became one of the most feared soldiers on the battlefield. So feared that the other generals decided that it was better to take his life than let him take over their army. So one night, the general sent 30 soldiers to kill him. By morning, 30 men lay there dead, and Vital was gravely injured. When Steve and I stumbled upon him in the jungles, he was barely clinging to life. And from that day on, Vital has been with us. I witnessed him kill a full-grown lion with nothing but a 45 and a machete. He's a 6'8" African badass with a serious attitude problem, but we love him to death. Also with us is Charlie. He's pretty new to the team. Graduated from MIT with a degree in information technology, then went on to work at Microsoft. He was there for 2 years before he got caught hacking. Charlie really gives me the creeps. He reminds me of one of those guys on To Catch a Predator. Except for Charlie's the kind of guy that'll hack your baby monitor and watch your wife breastfeed. He's sick. I repeatedly told Steve that I don't care for him and I don't even want him around. And truthfully, I hope on this trip, Bigfoot shoves a keyboard right up his ass. That way I don't have to be bothered with him anymore. He serves as our tech guy, setting up cameras and stuff like that. The geeky stuff that allows us to see what's coming to get us before it gets us. As for the rest of the crew, they're all ex-military contractors. Karate Kid, who's my boy. I love him to death. He's our point man, and he looks just like Ralph Macchio. Chef, who's our cook, and deadly with anything with a sharp point on it. Scissors, who got his name torturing jihadis in the Middle East. And last but not least, Gentle Ben. I think this son of a bitch is part Sasquatch himself. 6'11", 275 pounds of lean muscle. Ben. Now Ben is extremely fast and agile for his size. And the worst thing about Ben is he's unstable. And he's triggered by the least of things. Just last year, we're in Saudi Arabia at one of the markets. And this street vendor decides to start laying into his wife. I mean, beating her up. Foot to mouth type ass whooping. It looked like some WWE shit going on in the middle of the street. Steve and I just kept walking. It wasn't any of our business. But no, not Ben. Ben had to get involved. For some reason, this stranger beating his wife triggered him. And I don't know what it was. Maybe his father used to beat his mother's ass when he was a kid and he would witness it. But oh my God, he walks up to this man and with one hammer fist, bam, smashes him on the top of the head. He falls to the ground and he proceeds to start kicking him over and over and over again. In about 20 seconds, it's all over. But there's a crowd surrounding us all at this point in time. Ben looks into the crowd with this look on his face, like I dare any one of you to do something. And not one person moved. Yeah, Ben is our boy, but Ben is unstable and he's got problems. It was this crew of men that landed in the Beechcraft 450 at a tiny airport in Ruby, Alaska. And after a long process of unloading our gear, we all headed up the Mezzanine River in a few small motorized boats. Now you need to understand something. On the Mezzanine River, they don't really like you using motorized boats. It's more of a recreational type river. You find people kayaking and things of that nature. But we didn't have time for kayaks. The area we were headed to was 15 miles upriver, and we would have to travel 3 to 5 miles north into the wood lines to reach the area we knew the creatures lived in. The ride upriver was slow and rather uneventful. We saw a few grizzly bears, a moose here and there, some oversized beavers, but nothing really exciting. One thing that did kind of pique my interest was for a while a grizzly bear decided to run along the banks following us upriver. After a few hundred yards, he decided we would not worth his effort, so he ran back off into the woods. When we reached the area marked on the GPS, stopped, pulled our boats out of the water, and headed into the woods. Now, this terrain was like nothing I'd ever really seen before. The Sika spruce trees went on for miles. And the only good news was that the woods in this area wasn't really dense, so you had a good line of sight and good vision all around you. With our equipment gathered, we embarked on a hike towards the base of the mountain range. Now, I've been all over the world and been in some creepy places, but there was really nothing quite like this. The feeling that this place gave you was just being so isolated. It was different. And from the minute we headed into the woods, I had the feeling that something was watching me. Even Ben commented that something had eyes on us. He could feel it. The spot we had picked to camp for the night was about 1.5 miles away from where we suspected that the Bigfoot's territory was. So we got to work, cutting down trees and making a sufficient base camp. Charlie and Kid ventured out to set up night vision cameras and perimeter sensors, while the rest of us set up tents and solar power supplies and the rest of the equipment. By nightfall, we had finished our prep and were set up. Roger rested in his tent, while the rest of us were just sitting around telling stories. Somehow, during the time we were setting up, Chef had ventured out and killed one of those oversized beavers. And by the time he finished with it and added some rice, you'd have thought we were eating at Applebee's. So around 10 o'clock, just when we were all about to settle down to rest, one of the perimeter alarms on the north side was triggered. Of course, Everyone huddled around the little table that Charlie had set up as a monitoring station, and we discovered 2 grizzly bears moving silently through the woods. Now that is weird. Grizzlies are normally a solitary animal. You rarely see 2 of them together, ever. Just then, the 2 animals stopped and began to sniff the air with the nose pointed upwards and to the north. Then a larger one stood up on his hind legs and began to growl and roar. This sound echoed through the night air. And then the second one did the same thing. For a moment, they just stood there, staring into the darkness. Then came this vocalization like nothing I had ever heard. One of the bears took off running full speed out of the view of the camera. And the other one again stood up on his hind legs and growled. Next we heard what sounded like a tornado coming down the mountainside, breaking trees, rocks falling, and this yelling that was almost deafening. This grizzly bear took off south, heading straight for our camp, and within 45 seconds a 400-pound grizzly bear was bolting through our campsite and headed southward towards the river. Ben, Kid, and Chef grabbed their weapons, preparing for whatever it was that was chasing it, but the sound stopped. Looking back on it, I believe that this is how they first came to know exactly where our campsite was. Later, this would be a major problem, and one that will almost cost me my life. The following morning, at dawn, we all ventured northwards, towards the area where we had heard the sounds coming from. Now, the terrain in this area was quite different and sloped steeply uphill to the point that each step was difficult. Kid, who was on point, radioed back to us that he had found some large broken trees up ahead. Then a few minutes later, he said something that let us all know we had reached these creatures' territory. What in the name of Jesus? He sounded frantic when he told us about the huge trees driven into the ground upside down with their roots exposed. Some were older, but others were fresh and had just been placed. By the time we reached Kid, I died with his finger on the trigger. This might not be such a good look for us. Whatever did this had to be huge, Kid said. Steve looked unfazed as he inspected the trees, and he signaled for us to venture further beyond what clearly was some type of boundary line. As we moved deeper into the wood lines, it became evident and clear that we had reached some type of plateau. And I couldn't help but feeling like I was invading some type of foreign soil. The woods seemed completely still. Not just silent, but still. Almost as if the trees themselves was anticipating something happening. We didn't have to wait for long to discover what it was. Ben, who was covering our 6, shouted, "Contact!" Then let loose from his weapon. Then it went silent and he shouted, "Target hit!" Rushing towards the direction in which he fired, we discovered blood splatter and hair. This thing had to be fast. It took us less than a minute to get to the very spot he was shooting at. From there, Kid fanned out looking for a blood trail and any signs where it went. Only to return 5 minutes later saying he had lost the trail. It was like the creature had just disappeared. For the next 2 hours, we explored every square inch of that plateau and found all kinds of signs that this was indeed their area. Broken tree limbs that they used as markers, huge structures made of broken trees. This was a jackpot. Everything was here except for the clan. Now the climb to move further north was way too steep, so we decided to head back down towards our campsite. After what happened today, everyone knew there would no longer be a need for us to go out looking for these things. They were going to come to us. And when we arrived back at the campsite, Charlie was already working to move his motion sensors out 200 yards away from the camp. He said after hearing all the gunfire in the distance, he knew tonight we were in for some shit. And boy, was he right. No sooner than the sunset, we began to hear them from every direction. It was this whooping and then this screaming, almost as if they were calling out to each other over a long distance of miles. Then around 10 p.m. that night, everything went silent. Steve looked at Ben and Chef and said, "Hey, get ready. I think they're coming in for us." Charlie had this small drone that he flew up into the air just to inspect the area to see what was surrounding the perimeter. And from this bird's eye view, we saw 15 heat signatures all around us. We were surrounded on all angles. But for some reason, they were staying beyond our perimeter. We didn't know what they were going to do next, but I knew one thing: we weren't going out to them. They were going to have to come to us. 10 minutes later, the northern perimeter alarm went off. Then seconds after that, the southern perimeter alarm went off. Then the east and the west perimeter alarms went off. They were moving in. You could feel the ground rumbling as these things ran in at us. They would run just beyond the area of the lights, almost as if they were running zigzag patterns crossing around us. This full speed running back and forth, left and right, north, south, east, and west went on for the next 15 minutes. I think they were checking our defenses for some type of weakness. Then it started. A full-size tree came flying in over our heads, hitting one of our lights and knocking it down. Chef and Kid, who were covering the south, began to fire their weapons. Steve and I began to fire. Ben covered the east while Sisters covered the west. Back to back, with our backs turned to each other, we fired round after round and clip after clip. Charlie huddled in the middle of us with his computer trying to find out what was going on, and he kept calling, "Incoming from the north! Incoming from the south! Incoming from the east!" After what felt like an hour of pure madness, Ben got completely and totally enraged, and I saw him out of the corner of my eye going to his case and grabbing his AA-12 shotgun. Once he began shooting that shotgun, all activity ceased. And high above us, from the area of that same plateau, we heard a scream so loud and so powerful that I knew that this was just a test. The real danger was whatever that thing was at the top of the plateau, screaming and giving orders to these creatures. That we would discover the very next night.